All right, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. We are proud to be here, and of course, I'm proud to be surrounded by my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to show our unified and unwavering commitment to banning members of Congress from trading stocks. Joining me today, of course, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal from Washington, Congressman Ken Buck, my friend from Colorado, Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy from Illinois, Congressman Andy Kim from New Jersey, Congressman Adam Schiff from California. We're also, Congressman Levin is here too from California as well. Angie Craig, Abigail Spanberger, Matt Rosendale, and Michael Cloud will be joining us at various points during this press conference, of course. Multiple markups happening as we speak, but nonetheless, I'm grateful for all of them for their support and for signing on to a letter, a bipartisan letter by 21 members of Congress who have been leaders in the fight to ban congressional stock trading over the course of the last several years. That letter, which was sent today to the House Administration Committee, makes a simple request. It calls on the House Administration Committee, Representative Style, to take up and mark up legislation before the August recess that would do one simple thing: prohibit members of Congress from trading stocks. It is a simple, straightforward, and profoundly important request that we all agree on. The members that you see here standing aside me and next to me have all been leaders, as I mentioned, in the push to ban congressional stock trading. Each one of them have either led or co-led various pieces of legislation over the course of the last two sessions of Congress in particular. Now, those bills all have various nuances and differences, but there is one fundamental commonality to all of them. They ban members of Congress from trading stocks. And our request to the House Administration Committee is to do the important work that needs to be done to ultimately get a bill marked up and sent to the floor that would accomplish that same purpose. And of course, the necessity for that and the reasons why we believe in that so firmly couldn't be more clear and more obvious. Members of Congress should be putting the needs of their constituents and the American people first, not their stock portfolios. So we will continue to make every effort to convince our colleagues, and in particular the House Administration Committee and the leadership on that committee, to take this legislation up before the August recess. And there has been no stronger partner in that effort than my good friend and the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Pramila Jayapal.
Thank you so much, Representative Neguse. And let me just say, I'm so proud to be here with members of both sides of the aisle to call for Congress to take accountable action to ban stock trading. And we pushed for this last term as well under our leadership, under Democratic leadership. We're now pushing under Republican leadership. I think what we have in common here is a group of members who knows that no matter who controls the House, we need to pass this legislation. Reading the headlines, you can understand why. During the darkest days of the pandemic, at least 75 lawmakers bought and sold big pharma stock as these companies were lobbying Congress, and we were authorizing billions for them to develop vaccines. Only 2 in 10 Americans actually say that they trust their government because they believe that we're trying to pad our pockets instead of working for them. The American public and the constituents that we were elected to serve should never have to have that question in front of them. I am very proud to have introduced with my Republican colleagues, Representative Ken Buck and Representative Matt Rosendale, legislation called the Bipartisan Ban on Stock Ownership Act, which bans individuals from trading stock, individual members, as well as their spouses, and it creates real consequences for violations, a civil penalty of up to $50,000 per violation, because there needs to be a really accountable solution. I'm proud to lead this legislation. It's sponsored by many Democrats and Republicans to restore legitimacy in our political system, to assure people that we work for them, to ensure that Congress isn't a revolving door of those scheming to get rich quick off of insider information. So this press conference is to say, we all stand united. We have been pushing leadership on both sides to actually take this question on. It is something that matters to the American people. It is something that matters to us as members of Congress. 70% of Americans agree with us. It is time to rebuild that trust. And with that, very proud to turn it over to my colleague, my partner in this effort, somebody who's been an unwavering voice on this question, Representative Ken Buck of Colorado.
I'm beginning to question how many Republicans are with me up here.
They're on their way.
I actually have to go do my hair, and I'll be right back. So, Congress has a fundamental problem in this country, and I recognize it when I go home and I talk to folks in Colorado. People don't trust us, and it's ironic because they trust their member. They don't necessarily trust Congress as an institution. One of the reasons they don't trust Congress as an institution is because we're looked at as being self-serving. We are trying to put the one earmark in a spending bill to help us get reelected, or we're trying to make some money on the side. We didn't take this job. 99% of the members of Congress didn't take this job because we wanted to get rich. We understand that it is a public service. We understand that we will do this, and then we will go home and we will engage in some other public service, other important work. But to trade in stocks is a little ridiculous. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have enough money to trade in stocks, but there are people out there, and I would suggest that maybe the Senate, because they're all rich and they are all really old, that the Senate should probably get their act together and lead on this issue and get a bill passed and send it to the House. But we should also be doing our job on this side of the hill and make sure that we pass something that's significant. I really appreciate my work with Congresswoman Jayapal, and I think that when you look at these different bills, they have some differences. But the differences are unimportant. The important thing is that we move something, that we tell the American people we care. We recognize the issue of appearance of impropriety. We recognize the issue that something needs to happen. And there are members, and I hope all members, will embrace this idea that our ethical responsibility to the American people is far greater than any self-serving interest that we have in this job. So I appreciate you all being here and covering this, because I think it's a really important issue that gets out to the American people, that the American people know about this effort, and that they contact their member of Congress and express their views to their member of Congress. Having said that, I welcome to the podium the Congressman from California, Adam Schiff.
Thank you, Representative, and thank you, Congressman Neguse, for your leadership on this issue. Members of Congress have unique and undoubted access to an abundance of information relevant to the U.S. stock market and far more than the general public does in many cases. That information could very well be used in the wrong hands or even unknowingly to one's personal financial advantage or benefit. While insider trading by any person in a position of power is already illegal, there's a lot more that we can do to remove even the appearance of impropriety and to strengthen penalties. I'm proud to be a original co-sponsor of the Trust in Congress Act. Believe it is well past time that legislation banning the trading of stocks by members of Congress be brought before the Congress for a markup. It is important for the American people to trust that their representatives are acting on their behalf, not their own personal financial interests. And this legislation, I think, gets very much to that point. Congress is held in very low regard because, as Representative Buck was saying, all too many Americans think their member of Congress is acting on behalf of special interests or their own personal financial interest. And this is something very specific we can do to help restore confidence and remove not just impropriety, but even the appearance of impropriety. So I'm proud to support this. I was proud to support similar legislation last session, and now we just need to get the job done. With that, I'm proud to invite up to the podium Ranking Member and Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy.
Thank you, Congressman Schiff. Thank you, Joe, for convening all of us. Usually you can't get two members of Congress to agree on a lunch spot, let alone so many to agree to come for a press conference. But this issue is so important. And it goes to the heart of, I think, why all of us ran for office, and that is to do the people's business, not our own, to do the people's business. And, the people at the founding of this country recognize this. They said, and I'm paraphrasing James Madison in the Federalist Papers. He said, if people were angels, we wouldn't need a government. And if government were made of angels, we wouldn't need controls on government. And yet neither of those principles are true. And that's why we need to ban stock trading by members of Congress. It's very simple. First, it will show Congress's commitment to putting constituents first. Second, we need to send a message to all of our colleagues about what it means to serve in Congress. If you're not willing to put constituents ahead of your portfolio, we don't want you. If you're not willing to make the service of the public your first priority, we don't need you. And if you care more about your finances than your constituents' finances, your constituents deserve better. I'm proud to call for a ban on stock trading with my colleagues, and I hope the CHA will soon take up this issue. Thank you. And now I'm introducing Katie, Congresswoman Katie Porter.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Katie Porter from California's 47th District. The American people don't have faith in Congress. And instead of working to earn back their trust, too many members of both parties just point fingers and claim it's the other guy's fault. But the truth is that this is a persistent problem, whether Congress is under Democratic control or Republican control. And we each need to take responsibility to fix the problem of congressional stock trading. Banning Congress members from trading stocks is about showing the American public, not with words, but with actions, that we act in the public interest. I'm proud to say that I have never traded stocks during my time in Congress, and neither have the vast majority of those standing up here with me today. And I have news for my colleagues. I've heard from Democrats, Republicans, and independents on the campaign trail that they think more members should get on board. Americans have confidence that I will not hesitate to hold big pharma, payday lenders, or other special interests accountable because I don't trade their stocks. I've been proud to help lead this effort since my very first term in Congress, including partnering with Senator Gillibrand, the author of the original Stock Act, on legislation to get this done. I'm glad that we are building momentum and other members are getting on board to see how congressional stock trading erodes trust in government. Now it's my pleasure to introduce my friend, someone else who is not afraid to shake up the way Washington works, Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger.
Thank you. I am delighted to be here. And the reason we're here is because we continue to see story after story hit the headlines of members of Congress who bought or sold stock relative or related to the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. Before that, it was the invasion of Ukraine. Before that, it was COVID. Time and time again, we see reporting, and I appreciate a free press, so thank you for reporting, on places where members of Congress are buying or selling stocks associated with briefings they may have gotten, events that are occurring, and frankly speaking, whether there was any ill intention or not, the American people think it's outrageous. And as many of my colleagues have mentioned, this is about more than just stomping out impropriety. This is about stomping out even the perception of impropriety. Because the idea that we could go to a meeting with the CEO, or we could sit down in a classified briefing, and we could leave that meeting, we could leave that briefing, or we could head towards a vote and call the stockbroker and say, yeah, let's buy this, let's sell that. It just doesn't seem appropriate. And so here we are, time and time again, where we know that the American people have an ever-degrading trust in Congress, in our system, in the strength of our democracy. And this is one small way that we can say, we've heard you. We want to make sure that you know that every time we're in that briefing room, or every time we are in that classified meeting, or anytime we are going to take a vote, we are doing what we think is right. And if they agree with us or they disagree with us, that's their decision to make. But we are doing what we think is right based on the needs of our districts and our constituents, and not at all influenced by or in service to our stock portfolio. The easiest, most straightforward way to achieve this is to ban members of Congress from trading stocks. And I am so proud that we continue to have an ever-growing coalition. The bill that I lead with Congressman Chip Roy has more than 55 co-sponsors, Democrats, Republicans, across the board, geography-wise, across the board, political ideology-wise, because this common sense solution of banning members of Congress from trading stocks just makes sense. So I thank my colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, for their commitment to this principle and their desire to work together to really help take one step forward in restoring the trust that the American people deserve to have in our Congress. And with that, I believe that I am introducing Mr. Andy Kim from New Jersey.
I think we got a little turn around. Yeah, exactly. Hey everyone, I'm Andy Kim from Jersey. I'll be brief here, but what I'll just say is, look, I've run now 3 elections in tough areas alongside some of my colleagues here, and what I find fascinating is I always get asked about this, and people are asking like, oh, these battleground districts, these swing districts, it must be these, Democratic armies versus these Republican armies kind of duking it out and seeing who prevails. But what I try to express, given my experience, is that what I've learned is that the vast majority of people in my district can't stand either party right now. And the trust is so eroded. Like, we live in the time of the greatest amount of distrust in our government in modern history. That's the era that we're in right now. And this has gotten to a point where it is such an existential threat to our ability for our democracy to function. I've come to believe over my experience that the opposite of democracy is apathy. And I feel like we're getting so dangerously close to that apathy and that helplessness coming in because people don't trust their elected officials, their government, how this is all coming together. Now, when I go out there and talk to them at town halls and other things, I can tell you the only thing that I say legislation-wise that gets standing ovations from people across the political spectrum is this issue of banning stocks, ownership, trading, however we want to frame it. This is powerful. It's a powerful signal, and it's something that can really push that forward. This idea that if you have a job whose job description is in the Constitution of the United States, you should be held to a high standard. No one's forcing us to do this job. If we choose to do it, we do it for the right reasons, and we show people we do it for the right reasons. So that's why I support this, and I think it is so critical at this moment of deep distrust in our government that we take these steps to rebuild that type of respect and trust. Thank you. And I don't know who's coming next.
Our friend Ken Buck was lonely, so Matt Rosendale has joined the event. We'll have Representative Rosendale, and then Representative Levin, and then Representative Craig to close us out.
Appreciate it. It's good to be here with everyone. I am going to keep my remarks short because I don't know how long everyone is speaking. I see my friend Ken Buck back there, so I'm sure you've been here for at least 20 minutes. I think it's really simple. When you get elected to office, you have to make a decision whether you're going to be a public servant or a profiteer. It really is that simple. And perception is reality. And if you are sitting in a committee and you're taking information just to act upon it, would get you landed in jail if you were working up on Wall Street. It's called insider trading. Being a member of Congress and having the ability to manipulate regulatory and tax climate also to change the value of any company or industry makes it even worse. And so, if for no other reason than the perception of the American people to make sure that we are making impartial, completely unbiased decisions about the legislation that comes before us, we need to do this. And for those who are running for office and you think I've got a large portfolio, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to sell it before I even get elected to office? We have provisions in there that say you can phase this out. You can sell your investments after you enter into Congress, should you be fortunate enough to be elected by your district. And that is really what this is all about. So are you going to be a public servant or a profiteer? We believe once you arrive here that you should be a public servant and there should be no clouded perception of anything otherwise. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Congressman Neguse, for bringing us together. I want to echo my colleagues on both sides of the aisle in calling on House administration to take up legislation to once and for all ban members of Congress from trading individual stocks while in office. When we take the oath of office, we all take that same oath. We are accepting an enormous responsibility that requires a higher standard of conduct than private citizens. We've been entrusted to put the public's interests above our own. And maintaining that trust requires that we make some sacrifices. That public trust is key to good government. If our constituents have any reason to believe that we have a conflict of interest or even the appearance of a conflict of interest, we erode the trust that helps provide the Congress with its legitimacy. When I first started running for Congress in 2017, my wife and I made the decision back then to divest from any individual stocks that we held. We moved everything into diversified mutual funds that are managed by a third party. That's the decision that we made, and it served us well. That decision helped me gain the trust of my constituents, regardless of their political leaning. Our country really is quite divided. Some might say more divided than it's been in a very long time. But standing here today, we can see that this is not a partisan issue. It's about putting our constituents first, always. Passing legislation to ban stock trading by members would be an important first step towards achieving that goal. And I hear it just like you. Every town hall I do, I'll be doing my 100th town hall coming up in June. And this is the one, when I bring this up, that gets a standing ovation every time. And with that, I'll introduce my dear friend from Minnesota, Angie Craig.
Well, thank you so much, Mike, and thank you for bringing us together, Congressman Neguse. Hi, everyone. I'm Angie Craig. I represent Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District. It is not often that in this room you see Democrats and Republicans united on a stage, but I'm so glad that there is such agreement on this stage and throughout much of our caucuses on this issue. That's why we're here today, because banning members of Congress from trading individual stocks is just a common sense issue. My constituents and 76% of Americans agree that members of Congress should not trade individual stocks. Like some others on this stage here today, I put that into action before I was sworn in as a member. I was fortunate enough to work for a publicly traded company for 12 years before I came to the Congress. Before I raised my hand to be sworn in, I sold every single stock that I owned in that company because I did not believe that I could come to Congress and escape the criticism and the ethics of being compromised by owning an individual stock. I introduced something called the Humble Act in my first term in 2019 that would prohibit members of Congress from trading individual stocks. And I'll just say this, as part of my responsibility at my publicly traded company, I had responsibility for investor relations in addition to a number of other areas of the business. It was my job to talk to sell-side analysts and buy-side analysts around the country. I can tell you that not only do they trade stocks, those individuals trade in information. That is how stocks move, is through information. And I could not believe after I joined this body that members of Congress could sit in a briefing about something like the Boeing Max and walk out with the information that we had just obtained and that it was perfectly legal to trade stock or short stock is what I thought as I left that room in Boeing. And so I will just say to every single one of you, many of us up here have walked and been examples of what we would like to see in this Congress. And I would say to this, if your individual stock portfolio is more important to you than serving your constituents, then maybe you shouldn't be a member of Congress. And with that, I would just turn it back to Congressman Joe Neguse.
Questions?
McCarthy has expressed general support for banning members of Congress from trading stocks. He said he wants to do this in some sort of bipartisan way. I'm wondering if any of you all up here have ever had, since he became speaker, some sort of direct conversation with him about this issue.
If anyone cares to respond to that? Our two Republicans.
We just wrapped up the debt ceiling and immigration legislation. We haven't got to this one yet.
I mean, I guess what I would say is it is abundantly clear that there is a growing consensus within the Congress on a bipartisan basis that the House should take up legislation. And the reason we're all gathered here today is to underscore that request to the chairman of the House Administration Committee. And, you know, the Congress now has an opportunity, as Representative Craig said, to walk the walk as far as actually marking up a piece of legislation is concerned.
I answer.
Sure.
I think there's a few steps that we need to go through. One, it has to pass House administration because there's a number of proposals. I think we have to coalesce around one set of values really in this bill. Then Matt and I fought very hard to have a majority of the majority rule in the House Republican Conference. So once we have a piece of legislation, then it's up to Republicans to work within our conference to make sure that we've got 51% that want this bill on the floor. Then it would be appropriate to go to Speaker McCarthy and say, we passed both tests. It's come out of committee. We have the majority of the majority. Would you put it on the floor? I think there are a few steps that need to happen before we get to that.
Other questions? Oh, go ahead, and then we'll go to you, Matt.
You all mentioned that a number of proposals to ban lawmakers stock trading. A number of you are sponsors of the proposal. What is the plan for coalescing around one? I know that all of them, generally speaking, would ban lawmakers from trading stocks, but there are details different in each one. So, A, how would you coalesce around one? And are you then going to ask the House administration to take up that one piece of legislation? Because the letter today was a little vague. Specific bill.
Yeah, so I think that's the challenge that we've proposed to the committee. I'm a co-sponsor rather, of every bill that's been introduced by all the members gathered here today, because as I said, that they all share that one core commonality of banning members from trading stocks. Obviously, as we said, there are nuances. Every proposal is different, but Representative Buck articulated it so well. The difference is pale in comparison to a commonality. And the question now is before the chairman of the House Administration Committee and the ranking member to design a process in which they can mark up a piece of legislation. Of course, they could start with one of these pieces of legislation as the shell. We had, or rather, the House Administration Committee had a very robust legislative hearing. I believe several members, Representative Spanberger or others, testified during the course of that hearing, 60 days ago. So the clock is ticking. I think now is the time for the committee to do what committees do best, which is to mark up the bill and have a robust amendment and debate process to get to a piece of legislation that can get a majority on the floor.
More than 80 members signed on to a stock ban have actually traded stocks. So how do you guys actually solidify those votes when it matters?
I think it's basically the additional parameters that you're going to find in each of the pieces of legislation. There's different proposals that provide for blind trust. There's different proposals that provide for phasing out of existing ownership of stocks that you have when you enter in. What is the time frame within that? So you're going to be able to pick up people along the way, depending upon which of those provisions are brought in, and it's a balancing act. It's like a seesaw, because as you bring in people by bringing in some provisions, are you going to lose some other people on the other side? So this is a negotiation that takes place in committee, and then it will also take place out on the House floor to determine the priorities.
Eight of your colleagues have been hypocritical on this issue. How do you get them?
They haven't been hypocritical. Let's be fair. They have traded in stocks because it's legal to trade in stocks.
Yeah.
They are saying we think it's a better practice for the House not to trade in stocks, and if that's the rule of the House, we will not trade in stocks. Right. I don't think anybody up here wants to call a member of Congress hypocritical because they have followed the rules.
Well, and I would add that I'm aware of some of our colleagues who are in the process of rolling their dollars or their stocks into blind trusts. I don't know how public they are about that sort of process. I think it's been important. I think everyone here has mentioned it. It's important to me to be aligned with the parameters of the bill that I support and introduce. But I do know that there are members who are not necessarily feeling the same urgency. They believe in principle. They're certainly willing to put their name on as a co-sponsor, but they're figuring it out. Well, if it's a bill that doesn't allow its total divestment, then maybe I hold and I divest if that's the bill we go with. The blind trust bill, do I do a blind trust? And so there's a little bit of trepidation of how do they address, what's the path that they move forward? Because there's a couple different ways. We know we want to ban members of Congress from trading stocks, but there's a couple different remedies for what to do with current holdings. And so I appreciate you being targeted and focused on that. But I think if you ask some of those members, they'll express that exact, either they're currently in the process of getting into a blind trust or they're figuring out which path is going to be the one that ultimately, when this bill becomes law, that we actually vote on.
And I would just add to something we were talking about earlier. I think it would be appropriate for House admin to have another hearing, a legislative hearing, as well as a markup. We have a new chairman, we have new party control. I think people's thinking and experience with this and navigating as they're digging into the different proposals and thinking, what is the path that I think would work best? So I would support having another legislative hearing. And I think that's something that Republicans could do along the way to build that majority consensus, is give an opportunity for members to come and testify, talk about how these different bills would apply in their situations. I sympathize with what Abigail's saying, that people don't know what change to make because they don't know what direction we're going to go. So if you're putting things in a blind trust, that's very expensive. We need to have Congress say that your blind trust isn't good enough or you didn't qualify. That said, there are lots of things in politics and in campaigning that are legal that I don't necessarily do, right? So I don't take corporate PAC money, and that is perfectly legal. So I don't trade individual stocks in Congress. That is legal, but that is a choice that I make. And so I would encourage more people to kind of walk the walk to help demonstrate that this change would not, in fact, be whatever catastrophic, horrible thing that they think is going to happen, that we can't pass this bill, Congress after Congress. I think the more of us who are actually like, we're already doing it, I think it helps demonstrate how feasible it is.
Yeah, I think Congressman Neguse's idea of including journalists in this bill is a good one also.
You can tell why we're Colorado colleagues. That's why other questions? Again, thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate it. Couldn't be a more important conversation. Great.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks for serving the profiteer.